Oh, hey everybody. I'm
Robo.
from Sin and Sci-Fi here. I was just reading The Man from Mars, which is a biography of Ray A. Palmer, who was the editor at Amazing Stories. And I've come across this section that kind of perhaps is the crossroads of sin and sci-fi. You see, in 1950, Ziff Davis, who was the publisher of Amazing Stories, left Chicago for New York. And they left behind Palmer and one of his managing editors, previously assistant editor, a guy named William Hamling. Hamling it was a sci-fi writer, and he had a number of things published, and he went out on his own, starting a company that ran Imagination, a sci-fi magazine, and he did that for a few years. And around that time, he knew Hugh Hefner, and Hugh Hefner kind of floated this idea to him about a men's magazine, and he didn't think much of it. And he was sorry later that he didn't, because in 1955 he started Rogue magazine, which was a competitor to Playboy magazine, and that became so successful for him he kind of dropped the Imagination and that kind and the other magazines he was doing there. Eventually, he started a company called Greenleaf. Greenleaf had a number of DBAs. One of them was Freedom Publishing, and Hamling had Raymond Palmer and Richard Shaver, who's famous for the Shaver mysteries that Palmer worked on and claimed were true. These were about elder gods that lived in caves underground. Caused quite a stir among his readers, but also boosted his subscriptions, which made his bosses happy. And so Palmer was the person that incorporated that company, but otherwise he and Shaver didn't have anything to do with it. But it kind of came back to haunt them later on, which I won't bother to get into. Another company was Blake Pharmaceuticals, which seems kind of strange, and I'll get into that in a minute. Around 1959, Harlan Ellison, another writer that you might recognize from science fiction and other types of genres, was hired to edit Rogue magazine, but it was kind of a cover, and that what he was really doing was working at Blake Pharmaceuticals next door to Rogue, and was running a black box operation in which he got manuscripts from the Scott Meredith literary agency. And they were worried that they were publishing things that were just acceptable, so they were worried about the law getting involved. And so this was the operation they set up. Scott Meredith isn't even a real name. That was the kind of undercover operations that were happening. At one point, Harlan Ellison left and went to New York City, and Hamling went back to get him to continue to do what he was doing. And in making such a deal, um, Hamling came up with a line of books that Harlan Ellison could edit, besides working on these sleazy novels. So there you go. Eventually, Greenleaf moved to the West Coast, somewhere in between Algis Burtis, I don't know how to pronounce his name, another sci-fi writer, was being groomed by Harlan Ellison to replace him. But eventually the whole operation went to the West Coast. And Earl Kemp, a big sci-fi fan, and he published some books on sci-fi criticism. He became Hamlin's man on the West Coast, and they continued to operate from there. And some sci-fi names that wrote for Greenleaf in the 60s include Marion Zimmer Bradley and Harlan Ellison, of course, and Robert Silverberg, and uh, yeah, I think that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But a lot of other writers that went on to become very famous for their crime fiction, like Donald Westlake and Lawrence Block. So there you have it. I don't know if this is the origin of sin and sci-fi coming to a crossroads, but it's the soonest I could find. And anyway, I hope you find that interesting. Maybe you knew a lot about that already, because Greenleaf was a pretty big company. Um, they kind of stayed clear, of their skirmishes with the law, but eventually, in I think it was in '71, they published a version of the obscenity report that Nixon's people put together, but they included the graphic images that they had reviewed inside, and both Kemp and Hamling spent some time in jail, at least a few months, I believe. Anyway, so there you go. A little history on sin and sci-fi. This is Robo. Thanks, and this book's awesome. Check it out.